I'm going to attempt to tell sort of the story of my life leading up to my NDE, and also the story about my NDE. It's gonna be a long one. Probably, I'm pretty sure not in one video. It had to be in more than one, but it's I hope y'all enjoy it because it's my life. Anyway, I was born in Natchez, Mississippi. I'm not sure why my parents were there because our home was in Vicksburg, but anyway, I was born in Natchez. In the what's the guy's name? The President of the Confederate States. Well, anyway, a memorial hospital named after the Confederate States president. But anyway, my stroke only affected my ability to remember names, nothing else as far as my memory. Anyway, only name that's coming to me is Robert E. Lee, but he was the general at the Confederate side. Anyway, not important to what I'm doing. I was born in Natchez, and I'm not sure how long we stayed there and returned back home to Vicksburg, but anyway, I grew up in Vicksburg, and my earliest memory is when I was 5 years old. We lived my father worked for a company called Letourneau, and they built oil rigs. Mr. Letourneau was a genius when it came to designing things that ran off all electricity. I mean, those oil rigs designed by Mr. Letourneau are all electric. They use no hydraulics, no mechanical, no engines. The engines in the engine room, how you doing? Only run generators that run the electric. I worked there for a long time too. After my father stopped working there, I eventually started working there, only because it was close to the house and I was able to work really hard at that time, so that job was built for me because it required long hours and extremely hard work, and I could and would do it, and I did. Anyway, that was much later, but my first memory is at 5 years old, living in Letourneau housing. Mr. Letourneau believed in taking care of employees to the point of, oh shit, I gotta go get some. He had not base, I was when I was in the military. He had company housing, company store, I mean, a pool, a small store, a barber shop, everything that an employee could need for his life to be right there near the company. So you never had to leave Letourneau property to do anything other than buy groceries. And there was a small grocery store, in the South for a long time. We had stores called Piggly Wiggly, and there was a Piggly Wiggly up the road from the house. There's going to be more about that store, but anyway. You could go there. It's only a few miles from the plant, so it was convenient. A caregiver. Who knows what the fuck that's about? Anyway, so I remember we lived there when I was a kid, and we lived in the lower part of the housing. It was all the same. Everybody called it the Flintstone houses because they were built of concrete. I mean, storms couldn't touch them. They were indestructible until they tore them down. But anyway, weather couldn't destroy them. But they all had heated floors that heated houses. I mean, they were designed really well. Mr. Latono was good to his employees. And first memory I have in my life is in the base house in there. I remember being upset one day because the little boy who lived next door, his name was Stephen. I'm not sure Stephen who anymore, but he was around my age. I was 5 years old. He was close to my age. He had bit me, and he hurt me. And my mother and his mother were trying to force me to bite Stephen, and I was crying because I didn't want to. I wasn't a biter. I mean, either a kid's a biter or they're not a biter. And I wasn't, and he was. So that's my first memory. It's me being forced, or trying to be forced to bite another kid, which I didn't do, I would never do. Anyway. And next thing I remember is later on I guess about 6 or 7 years old, we started going to a babysitter. And there was a little girl there. Well, the babysitter, Brenda, had 3 kids. Michelle, or Frankie, which is what people call her now, and Renee, the middle kid, and Cameron, the baby. And we went there for her to watch us every day for a couple of years, I guess. And anyway, they were Seventh-day Adventists, which kind of drove how they acted and how they treated kids, because Seventh-day Adventists have weird rules. I mean, religion is what it is, but they got weird rules. It's driven by an old lady named Ella White. She's the one that invented Seventh-day Adventists, but they go to church on Saturday. They only eat certain things on certain days, like Catholics. Not like Catholics, but keep us eating schedule. But Ellen White taught nutrition. She believed in the people in her church eating very healthy. I mean, she's a smart lady for what she did, and when she did it, she was ahead of her time. But anyway, I only know that because I'll tell you in a minute. But anyway, we would go there every day, and Brenda was pretty strict because of her beliefs. And I remember we all got in trouble for something. I don't remember what it was, but anyway, there was me, my sister, her 3 kids, and Frankie, who was a year older than me, and Deanne was my age, we ended up going to high school together, and I think that was it. But anyway, me and Michelle kind of, she's a cute little girl. I mean, she wasn't a cute growing up, but she's a cute little girl. Anyway, she ended up being my girlfriend, and me and her would kind of just hang out and talk and play and whatever kids do. But anyway, and after, I guess my mother was either going to school or she attempted to work a couple times, so that's why we were going there. But anyway, by the time when I was 7, almost 8, it was decided that we had stopped going to Brenda's house because my mother was gonna leave and I wasn't gonna have a mother anymore. That's why I always say I never had a mother, because she left when I was so young and I never had a mother after that, so I never had a mother. I mean, I barely remember her being in the house with us. I remember, I'll tell you in a second, but anyway. The last day that I was gonna be there, me and my sister knew that it was our last day, but Michelle told me they didn't know until we left. But anyway, me and her had the best day ever. Well, it started. Anyway, me and her kissed, and that was my first kiss ever with a girlfriend. She was my first girlfriend, my first kiss, and I didn't see her again for 40 years. But anyway, I'll tell that story later. Anyway, we stopped going there, and I remember Diane, my mother. She's not my mother, not really my mother, because I never had a mother, so I call her Diane. Anyway, Diane would, I'm not sure when it was, if it was before, after we had been going to Brenda's, or the timeline kind of has blurred over the years, so I'm not sure. But anyway, I remember her taking us. There was a family named Huey. We had started going to the Mormon church, and my mother got us kicked out of every church we ever went to, so I'll explain why later. But so we had started going to a Mormon church for a little while, and she had started taking us over to the Huey's house, and me and the Hueys had 3 kids, and the mother was never there, only the father and the kids. Me and my sister were expected to hang out with the kids, and we destroyed the house because we were unsupervised, because Mr. Huey and my mother were in another room. They would eventually come out after a couple hours or whatever, and the house would be destroyed because we would just act like animals, doing whatever, and they were in the other room doing whatever. But I never realized my mother was cheating until later, much later. I realized she was cheating Mr. Huey. That's the reason we got kicked out of the Mormon church. But every church we tried every religion. Seventh-day Adventist, we got kicked out of there. Mormon, we got kicked out of there. Protestant, we got kicked out of everything because my mother could not control herself. She would always cheat and sleep with either a deacon or a pastor or somebody important in the church, and we'd always get kicked out of churches. But I never knew that until I figured it out later. Anyway, I'm not sure whether she ended the Hughes marriage or not, but Miss Hughes she's a nice lady. I met her a couple of times at church, never at home, but at church. She was never home. Only the kids and the husband and my mother. But anyway, she was not a good person. That's how my early childhood went, was my mother cheating and dragging us along to be witness to her bullshit. And she left my father and left us, and by the time I was 8, my father had us because she gave us up because she didn't have time to raise kids. I've always said she was too busy chasing dicks and dollars. Between her greed and her appetite for many, many men, I mean, I never had a mother. She was too busy doing what I said, either trying to fuck everybody or make every dollar she could. And even now, since she's retired, she's old. She's 20 years older than me. She'll be 78 this year. I'll be 58. But she has retired and has a pretty good bit of money because she retired from the Postal Service and she invested well. But anyway, that's beside the point. That's kind of a factor in my life also. But I'll tell that part later also. Anyway, she left us with my father, who, I mean, he meant well, but he was not a good person to raise kids by himself. He was a slave driver to me and my sister. I mean, we had like 2 acres fenced in for a yard, and most of it was on a hill. And I was expected to cut it every week with a push mower. And we raised about a half acre, maybe a little less, garden every summer. And I would be given a list of things to do every day when my father went to work, because I was out of school for summer break. Anyway, I'd be given a list of shit to do before my father got home. I would have to work my ass off in the hot ass sun, either cutting grass or pulling that damn garden. I never had a childhood. I was having to do my father's work because he was lazy. I mean, that's not being mean, I'm just being honest. He would come home every day. He had an old red recliner. I mean, he had that chair for years. It was wore out and just not worth fucking 2 cents by the time he finally got a new chair. But he would come home every day, get in that red recliner and lay back and take a nap while I worked. I mean, I worked all day and I worked all evening while he slept. And then he would wake up and inspect what I'd done, and either I'd done it to his expectations or I had to redo it. I had to every day go and feed. We raised as many as 38 pigs. We raised chickens, rabbits, quails, you name it, we raised it for food. I was expected to care for all animals and keep them fed and watered and whatever, and so I never had a break. Never had a childhood. I wasn't allowed to ever do anything, even all the way through high school. I was expected to work and go to school and never go anywhere. I wasn't allowed to ever I was never allowed to go anywhere with friends. I wasn't allowed to be away from home unless I was at school. I was expected to work and shut the fuck up and do his work and go to school. That was it. He was very strict, very hard on me. But my sister, she got away with murder. She was sitting in the house in the air conditioning because he would sometimes run the air. But anyway, most of the time he sat in the house and just burned up. But sometimes he'd run the air. But my sister was allowed to stay in the house and enjoy the cool air while I was out in the sun fucking suffering. I would push myself until I would turn just red as I could be and nearly pass out. We had a woman that he would only pay her $40 a week to come and clean and cook, and he used her and abused her the same as me. But anyway, her name was Velma. I loved Velma. Velma was an older black lady that cared about. She honestly cared about us. The way I remember it, now my sister argues everything I say, but this is based on my memory. It's as true as it can be, as far as I remember. But my sister calls me a liar on everything I say, so I don't pay attention to her. Anyway, Velma seemed to favor me a little bit because I was treated so badly. But anyway, she would come outside when I was out there cutting grass or doing whatever, and tell me I was too hot, which I was, and make me come in and rest and get a little something to drink. And she would watch her soap operas, and she got me interested in watching soap operas. So at a fairly young age, I started watching soap operas. Well, when I could, but I couldn't spend too much time inside. And my work wasn't done every day. I never found out what the consequences were because I never let it happen. I was too afraid. My father would threaten all kinds of crazy stuff, but I never pushed the issue to find out whether he'd do it or not. Anyway, he would threaten and talk crazy, but he was always cheating with the woman next door who was married to his first cousin, who had been raised like a brother to him, which was dead wrong. But anyway, they ended up having a big falling out. That story's coming. But from the time I was 7, 8 years old, I mean, even when my mother was still there, that I remember, he would make us go next door and pass messages to Hattie. And I liked her when I was young because she was fun for a little kid, but once I got a little bit older, I saw her for what she was, and I couldn't stand her. Anyway, Hattie Vines was a whore, the worst whore I've ever heard of. And I can tell you stories, and I will in a minute, but she was not a good woman at all. Anyway, my father cheated, but he ended up marrying a woman named Terry after my mother left. And he didn't deserve her. Terry was a good woman. I mean, until I moved to Nepal, I was going to before I died, I was going to a local church close to the house, and I started seeing Terry, and I started getting to talk to her again. I'd miss her because I hadn't seen her in so long, like 20 years or much more like 40 years anyway. I went from seeing her when I was a teenager to seeing her when I was an old man, but she was the only mother I ever had. Anyway, my father would force me and my sister sometimes, but I know he forced me all the time to run next door and tell Hattie this, tell Hattie that, kind of manipulate their marriage, control it to where he could do what he wanted to do with Hattie. And anyway, he is not a good person as far as that kind of thing went. I was taught from a very young age how to cheat and how to get away with shit that the kids shouldn't know. Eventually, after he ran Terry off with his cheating, he physically abused her. She admitted that, but she never told me. I heard him, but I'd lay in my bed, hear him, and I'd hear things that sounded like physical abuse. I never realized at that time what it was called, but now I know what was going on. But I don't know what he did, but it wasn't good. But anyway, he eventually ran Terry off, and once she was gone, he really pushed the issue of the cheating with Hattie because it went on through the whole marriage to Terry. He cheated on everybody with Hattie, and she wasn't worth a shit. That woman was so sorry. I hated her. I mean, I shouldn't say that, but I did. As a young person, before I died, I was able to hate people, and I hated Hattie more than anything in the world. For many years, I hated her more than anybody ever knew. But anyway. Once it finally came down that she was going to leave Russell to move into, we lived next door to Russell, and him and Johnny were best friends. They hunted, fished, they did everything together. Every day they were together. They were brothers more than cousins. I mean, they were honestly first cousins, but they were like brothers. They could have been closer, but Diddy was not a good person to Russell. And me and Russell discussed that a little bit after I was older, much older, like late 30s, early 40s. Anyway, Hattie, she would play mental games, and she told Johnny that Johnny was my father, but anyway. She told Johnny that in order for her to leave Russell and move into our house right next door to Russell, that me and my sister had to tell her that we wanted her there. And I told Johnny that I wouldn't because I didn't want her there. And he forced me to go over there and take her out back, and like we were looking at something, and cause I was always over there, cause I was a kid and I enjoyed the attention from her, but I was starting to realize that I didn't really want her around because she was nothing but trouble. I mean, at probably 12 years old maybe, I realized what she was, and I didn't want her. No, I was younger than that because I was a kid, really young kid. I was forced to go next door and go out back with her, like we were looking at something, and tell her that I wanted her there and I wanted her to marry Johnny and all this bullshit. He made me say it. He told me what to say and told me I better say it or I was going to pay. And I didn't want to find out what he meant, so I did it. I cried then too. You know, she should have known the way I was crying while I said it, that I didn't want her there, but she took my words as true because she wanted to move over there. So anyway, they got married. She moved in right next door to Russell, and we had always had our kitchen door had a dirt path to their kitchen door because we spent so much time going between houses that we were worn down a dirt path between the doors. And I spent as much time in the house as I did Johnny's house. And anyway, I ended up buying the house later, but I own it right now. I'm not there, but I'll never be there again. Anyway, so she ended up marrying Johnny and moved in, and it caused a big ass problem. We ended up having me and my Uncle Larry. I mean, Johnny bought a 5-foot chain link fence, and me and my Uncle Larry had to put a fence up around the house and between the houses because he was so scared of Russell. Russell's a big man. He had a group of 4 or 5 guys attack him in a parking garage and try to take whatever. And one guy cut him. He had a scar that went across his, like a big scar. One of the guys had a knife. They whooped him, that whole group of guys, until they were not moving no more. He didn't kill anybody, but he come close. That's how Russell was not a person you wanted to mess with. But anyway, you know, Johnny was scared of him for a good reason. He would have got whooped like whatever you think a bad whooping would be, it would have been worse than that. However, I liked Russell. He was better to me than Johnny was. Me and Russell would spend hours and hours talking and hanging out and doing things together because he had girls. He didn't have a son, so he kind of took me. It felt more like a father-son relationship should be than what I had with Johnny. But anyway, that ended whenever had he moved in the house. Russell went crazy. And you understand, him and Hattie had been together for many years and had 2 girls together. But the girls mostly stayed in Woodville, Mississippi, south of Natchez, down there with their grandmother. I never really cared for their grandmother because her name was, Joe was Russell's father. I don't remember his mother's name now, but I knew him very well, and she was like, consider herself better than anybody in her family. she thought she was better than everybody, and she didn't mind treating you like you weren't as good as the dirt on the bottom of her shoes, and she made sure you knew it. I didn't like her. Joe was okay. He was like her, but he was quiet about it. But she was just pushy and rude, and you name it. Anyway, I never liked going over to that house because she treated us bad. She didn't hide the fact that she didn't like us because we were dirt poor, and just they had a little money because Uncle Joe, he worked I think in a chemical plant or what, I'm not sure, but he made good money, and they didn't mind making sure you knew that they had money and you didn't. So I didn't like it over there. I did not like. I wish I could remember her name. Well, I don't really care, but it just seemed like it'd be important to say it on this video. But anyway, Russell would, after Hattie left, Russell would always call the house, threatening and doing things. He actually caught my father one time away from the house and nearly whooped his ass, but somebody interfered. But anyway, Russell had said he would sit in his kitchen pointing a rifle out his kitchen door window, pointing in our kitchen window door, and then he'd call and say, "Walk past the window, I'll take care of you." And that was meant for my father, but we were under threat all the time of Russell shooting somebody, and he wasn't playing. I mean, I watched him one day put the gun in his car, went up the hill to my cousin's house, behind our house up the hill, and he called down there and said, "I'm at James's house, just walk outside and I'll finish this." And he had the gun pointed down the hill, waiting for anybody to come out the house. But we lived with that threat for years because my father couldn't stop cheating with his wife. That's how my teenage years went, was trying to be killed by my cousin that I really cared about because of my father and Hattie not doing right. And I really couldn't blame Russell for the way he acted, but I mean, we didn't deserve. And all the family, I mean, my Uncle Jim, these were all my grandfather's brothers. Never met my grandfather. He was killed many years before I was born. He was killed in a crash when Johnny was 11. So anyway, my Uncle Jim and my Aunt Eva, we'd always go and hang out and have family time, and we'd eat supper with them, and all that stopped. James and Jackie, we'd go up there to their house and just play and have a good time being kids sometimes. That was the only time I ever had fun as a kid, was when we do things like that. But anyway, everybody stopped talking to us. We were not family anymore. James, Jackie, Uncle Jim, Aunt Eva, everybody just stopped talking to us. So me and my sister lost our entire family because Johnny and Hattie couldn't act right. So I grew up without any family. Anyway, my father would, raising us, he didn't buy much food. If we didn't raise it in the garden or kill it hunting or fishing, we didn't eat. So anyway, we had those pigs back there. So my father worked out a deal with Piggly Wiggly down the road. You know, I told you that would be part of the story. Anyway, my father worked out a deal with the Piggly Wiggly manager that we could go up there after hours and go through their garbage dumpster and get out the spoiled food for the pigs, which it wasn't for the pigs. That's what my father fed us. That's embarrassing, but it's the truth. So yeah, we ate out of the dumpster at the grocery store. That's how we ate. I mean, I would have been a lot hungrier than I was if it wasn't for that dumpster, but that's not the way you feed your kids. Anyway, that's how he fed his kids. But that went on for probably a couple of years. But he refused. He had money. I mean, I remember one time my cousin Hank, I remember Hank was in a bank one day when we were in there, and he noticed, that was back when you had a bank book to keep track of your money in your account. And Johnny had his bank book out looking at it, and Hank happened to notice that there was a pretty substantial amount of money in the account. And so I found out that my father had money later on, but he never spent it on food, never spent it on clothes. We would go to school in rags and eat garbage, and that's how I grew up. But I'm here. Anyway, I lived through it, but oh shit. I was not raised where kids should be raised. I was raised by a greedy slave driver. And I eventually got tired of his bullshit, and I ran away from home at 15 years old and went to Baton Rouge. Caught a ride with, there was a guy that grew up the hill behind me. They were poor. They had less than we did, but not really, because their parents loved them. They treated them good and fed them good. But I mean, just, they didn't have much. They had like 9, 10 kids, and Mr. Billy didn't make a lot of money, so they didn't have much, but what they did have, they made sure the kids had. They were good to their kids, a lot better than Johnny was to us. Anyway, me and Earl, that was the boy's name that lived there. He's a year or two older than me. He had a cousin of his from Baton Rouge up there, had come to visit for the weekend, and on Sunday he was driving back to Baton Rouge, and he was in a van, so Earl had worked out a deal with him that we would meet him down on the highway and catch a ride to Baton Rouge, and that's what was going to be our way to run away from home. Earl was unhappy with their situation being so poor. I was unhappy because of obvious reasons. So anyway, me and Earl, we had hidden bags of clothes in the woods on the way to the highway, and at a certain time we took off running and just ran as fast as we could. I remember I fell against a thorn tree and got a thorn in my hand, and I had a barbed wire fence fucking tear my pants and give me a pretty good mark on my leg. But anyway, we made it to the highway with our bags, and I don't remember the guy's name, but we got in the van and went to Baton Rouge, and that very first night they had figured out that we had caught a ride with what's his name. So they showed up at like 3 in the morning, and we heard them out there knocking and banging on the door, and that guy finally answered the door, and they said, "We know they're in there, so you better open the door." So he did. He lied and said they're not here. He said, I don't know what you're talking about, but they're not here. Anyway, he finally convinced them we weren't there, and they left. And the next morning when he got up to get ready for work, he woke us up and said, come on, y'all gotta go. And he dropped us off on the side of the highway in Baton Rouge, like out in the middle of nowhere. And we started walking. It was a miserable hike, but anyway, we eventually made it to. We found the mall and went in the mall and enjoyed the cool air and just tried to make a plan. Not a good plan, but a plan. We decided we're gonna go to Alexandria, Louisiana, because I had an ex-girlfriend in that area that I wanted to see, so that was my ignorant plan. A girl named Jamie Cummins. Jamie was the cutest girl I ever met up to that time, and I cared about her. I wanted to see her again because she had moved away from Vicksburg, and I missed her. So anyway, we decided to start walking down the highway. We didn't get very far, and we ended up going back to Baton Rouge, and we slept on the streets, kind of hung out and slept on the streets for several days. And I finally said, we're going to have to call somebody because this can't go on like this. So I eventually called Diane because I knew I didn't want to call Johnny because I didn't want to go back to his house. This was my whole reason for running away was to get away from Johnny. So I called Diane, and she was married to a guy named Tom Crosby. Anyway, talked to Diane for a little bit and just told her my reasoning behind what I did. And Tom was good to me. He was a good well, he was good to me. He was a cheater, but that didn't affect my life any. He had taken the time to design 2 bedrooms for me and my sister, had done custom paint work and really cool paint design on the walls. He was an architect, so he was able to plan and draw and plan a good, good plan for a bedroom for a kid. He was a nice man. But anyway, my mother eventually left there because he was cheating with his secretary. But anyway, that doesn't matter. Tom drove to Baton Rouge in his car. Eventually, that was my first car. But he came down and picked us up and drove us back. He never said nothing, but he just talked to us like we're grown-ups. He just good conversation. Enjoyed the ride back. He never said a word to discipline us. I mean, he understood that we had made a mistake, and we knew we'd made a mistake, so he didn't rub it in. Tom was nice like that. Tom taught me a lot. In the short time I was around him, he taught me a lot about being a good person, which I wasn't, but anyway, that's a different story. I had a mental illness that prevented me from being a good person, anyway. So Tom drove us back to Vicksburg, and Earl went to his house. I'm not sure what happened, and I convinced Johnny and Diane that I needed to move to Diane's house because I wasn't happy at Johnny's house. So he argued, and finally Tom was a big deal in the decision making, and they finally convinced Johnny to let me move to their house, at least for temporarily, until they found out why I was acting up, which I wasn't. they considered running away to get away from a slave driver acting up. But anyway, y'all please excuse me because I need to take care of something. Anyway, I moved to Diane and Tom's house, and we were there in the house with Tom probably close to a year, and Tom made Diane move out because he was done with her. She was probably cheating, but so was he. And me and Diane moved to a apartment, and I met my first serious girlfriend there, a girl named Casey. You know, Diane, in order to pay okay, Diane worked at Domino's Pizza, and I did too. I started working at Domino's when I was 15, so I was below the child labor laws, but they lied on my application to get me the job. Diane was a assistant manager, and she got me hired. I didn't have many hours, but it's a little bit, so it helped. Anyway, Diane worked double shifts. She worked 80 hours a week to pay for that apartment. I mean, she had to do that while I was there or not, but I wasn't really much of a cost to her. If I had cost her much money, she'd have got rid of me. That's for damn sure. She didn't spend money on kids. I mean, we weren't allowed to ask anything that involved a dollar. We weren't allowed to ask anything that involved her money. We're not allowed to know anything about her money because she was so secretive about her money. She was always like used her money as a way to control people, and it got worse and worse over the years later. Anyway, I was there by myself, unsupervised most of the time, and I was drinking Everclear. By the time I turned 16, I was throwing up blood pretty routinely because Everclear eats the lining out of your throat and out of your stomach. And I drank probably a bottle a week, which is a lot of Everclear. I remember being so drunk, sort of remember being so drunk that I would crawl to the bathroom from my bedroom because I couldn't walk. And when I would try to crawl past the stairs, sometimes I'd roll down the stairs and couldn't come back up, so I'd sleep at the bottom of the stairs. Anyway, I can't believe Diane never figured it out, but she didn't. And I was smoking weed pretty regular. Loved my weed, but anyway. As a black teenager, a little bit older than me, who introduced me to this girl one night named Casey. And me and Casey, I was 16 and she...
Hi.
Hey.
What's your name?
Mason.
Mason.
Yeah. She told me she was 15, so I was like, well, cool, we're basically the same age, so she became my girlfriend, and we did what boyfriend and girlfriends as teenagers do, and every day, many times every day. And she ended up getting pregnant. We smoked weed together and then did what we did, and we had a great time, but she got pregnant. We were ignorant about how all that worked, but we were having a good time. I'll never forget Casey. A girl named Casey Campbell. She was my first real girlfriend. Uh, she wasn't my first, cause a girl named Teresa Everett was my first, cause she took what she wanted. I didn't really have a say-so on my first time, cause she decided she was gonna get what she wanted, whether I liked it or not. So she got on me and rode me like I was meant for that. Well, I guess I was. Anyway, Teresa was my first, girlfriend that I did anything with. But Casey was my first girlfriend I really loved. And I would have done anything for that baby to be born and for us to have a life together, but it didn't happen that way. I was 16 and when summer came, I went to Utah to my aunt's house. I was going to be working construction to make some money before I went back to school in the fall. Anyway, I was out there having a good time, seeing a new state, meeting new people. I had a really, really strong southern accent, so every girl I talked to in Utah loved my accent. I mean, I had girls lined up trying to go out with me, so I was gonna have a wonderful summer. But anyway, I was there about 2 weeks, and there was a phone call that kind of ruined everything. I had been high every day in my English class after lunch, and I didn't pass. And you fail half the year was grammar, half the year was literature. I didn't pass the literature half of the year, and you fail any part of English, and you fail the year. So I failed the year, so I had to go to summer school, and I learned that Casey was pregnant. So I had to come home, and I told my aunt I was missing Casey. And I told my aunt I kind of trusted her to keep my secret. So I told her I had a girlfriend and we had done whatever, and she was pregnant. And she told my mother, well, Diane, never had a mother. Anyway, she told Diane that my girlfriend was pregnant, and that started a whole bunch of shit. So Diane kicked me out of the apartment and made me move back to Johnny's house, and I had to go to summer school, but only 2 weeks, and I passed with a 106 average. I mean, I wasn't a stupid kid, I just was high. I had the hardest English teacher in the school for that school year, and one day she was walking by. I was high as I could be. After lunch, I'd smoke some weed during lunch, and I'd be so high. The stuff I was getting at that time was the best weed from Colombia. That was laced with PCP. I didn't know what it was laced with at the time, but found out later because one of my friends actually overdosed. Anyway, this guy walked by me one day, and she liked me. For some reason, she liked me. She leaned down and whispered in my ear. She said, "You open your eyes a little bit and I'll leave you alone." I said, "You betcha." And I was like, damn it, she fucking said that. She smoked weed before. Because she was cool with me, but she was a hard teacher. Nobody liked her but me, because I knew what she really was she was a cool lady. I liked her. I also had her for summer school. And in summer school, she asked me, I had 106 average. She said, "Why didn't you do this during the school year so you didn't have to come here?" I said, "Well, the reason do I do this because I can? I said, in her class during the year, I would blow off every day. I'd be not high for test days, and I do good on tests, so I almost passed just doing good on tests because I was not stupid. Anyway, she said, why do you do this during the school year? I said, because I didn't have to. Some smart ass answer, but she just kind of shook her head and said, she realized I was wasting a lot of opportunity because I was a smart kid. We'll get to that part. When I moved to Diane's house, her and Tom decided I should start going to a psychologist named Mike Cartwright. Anyway, he was at the Corps of Engineers building every week, one day a week, and I'd go to see him. And me and Mike got to be good friends. He was not very professional with me because he figured out real quick that there was nothing wrong with me. I was just not happy with my situation. But Diane wanted to find out why I'd run away, so Mike finally told her, stop wasting money, there's nothing wrong with him. But during one week, he had noticed that I was fairly smart, so he decided to give me an IQ test, one that he had taken in the past. I did better than him. He was like, your kid's smart. He said he did, on the IQ test, he did better than me. So I tested way above at genius level, which now I know that's not hard to do. Not for me, but anyway. Mike told her to stop wasting her money because I didn't need him. I just needed to get away from Johnny. So anyway, when I got back from Utah, I was made to move back to Johnny's house. I was very unhappy with that situation, but it was a little different. I was allowed to do some stuff. I could go to a football game some Fridays, and every once in a while I was allowed to be a kid, so it was better than before, as far as that goes. Anyway. No, I ended up meeting Kathy, my first wife, and she got pregnant. Seemed to be a pattern, huh? Anyway, I decided that because I had gotten Kathy pregnant and we needed to get married and I needed to join the military. So I worked at Domino's, and there was a Navy recruiter like 3 doors down to the left and Air Force recruiter 1 door over to the right. And I've been talking to Alan, the Navy recruiter, for a long time. I took a aptitude test for the nuclear program for Alan, and he handed me the test. He said, you got 45 minutes, nobody finishes, so don't worry. But 18 minutes, and I finished the test, and he checked it, and he told me you missed one. I said, I know which one. I said the answer should have been, and I told him what the right answer was. And after that, nobody ever finished the test, but I finished in 18 minutes, and I told him what the answer to the one question I missed. So Alan called me every day after that, trying to get me to come on and sign the paperwork to join because he was going to get a good bonus because he had found the right one. But anyway, one day I was working and I worked kind of late. And when I was leaving work, I noticed that the Air Force recruiter was still in his office, so I just poked my head in and said, hey, what's up? and he's a good bullshit artist. And I should have never met AJ. AJ Washington was not a good person. He's a sorry person. Anyway, AJ's bullshit artist, and he fucking lied to me about everything. He said, "You're gonna get this, you're gonna get it." He made me sound like I'm gonna make a fortune, and that everything's gonna be like wonderful. I mean, he described it as something that didn't exist. He's a fucking liar, is what he was. But all recruiters are liars. They just some take it way too far, and AJ took it way past that. So I joined the Air Force, and while I was in basic training, my son was born. Anyway, Kathy showed up at AJ's office with her mother and Hattie, and they were trying to make, AJ had always told me that he'd get her in the system so she could see a doctor, and he never did. So they were there. Kathy was in the car in labor. Her water broke, and they were telling him, get her in the hospital, get her so she can be seen, have the baby. And AJ wouldn't do shit. So Alan actually took him. He saw what was going on, and he took him to the hospital and got everything done. Even though I'd done him wrong, he helped me. Anyway, my son was premature, so he had to be in the incubator for 2 weeks while I was in basic training. And I was allowed to make phone calls, extra phone calls to check on him. But anyway. My son lived, and thanks to Alan, the military had taken care of everything. AJ did nothing. When I got out of basic training, I went home to whoop AJ's ass, but he was gone. They told me he had been kicked out of the Air Force because he was sleeping with potential female recruits. And they caught him and kicked him out at 19 years. That's what the asshole deserved. He didn't deserve a retirement. Fuck him. Almost let my son be born in a car. And if he'd been born in a car with his issues, he'd have died. So AJ almost killed my son. But anyway. I eventually got out and went to my first school and learned my job and went on to my job and had my career, and I was in for 16 years total. That didn't end good. But that's a long story. The Air Force fucking sent me to prison for something I didn't do, and they knew I didn't do it, but it is what it is. It's done. I can't change it, so that's my life. But anyway. When I got out of prison, I went back to Mississippi, and I worked construction for a long time. Being smart allows you to learn jobs pretty quick, so I learned. Everywhere I went, I learned my job, plus everybody's job around me, so I could do everything, so I didn't have to wait on anybody. that was the way I worked. If I was a plumber and I needed some electrical, whatever mode, whatever, I did it because I didn't want to wait for somebody to come do whatever. And when I was a welder, normally you had to be picked to become a fitter because welders are a dime a dozen, but a fitter has to be able to think and make decisions and be smart, basically. Now, I was a welder by the time I'd been welding for 2, maybe 3 months, I was welding stuff that people weren't allowed to weld on for years and years, and they had to be advanced welders. But I learned so fast. I was allowed to weld on the legs on the oil rig, which is a big deal. And that had never happened before me. I wasn't even certified for it, and I was allowed to weld the legs. And after I did it the first time, they came to me every time there was a set of legs to be welded and got me before anybody on the rig to go weld the legs because I was good at what I did. I mean, I'm not bragging, I'm just telling the truth. I mean, I learn fast and I work hard, and that makes for a good worker. But after maybe 6 months, I went to my supervisor and I said, I want to be a fitter. And you don't ask to be a fitter, you get picked to be a fitter. But I went and said, I want to be a fitter. He said, okay, Monday, show up and be ready to be a fitter. I mean, that had never happened either. And my lead man, he didn't know it. I'd gone to the supervisor and gotten permission to be a fitter, but so he was expecting me to get my welding shit Monday morning, but Monday morning I grabbed a torch and headed out to be a fitter. He was upset because he lost his little foot on my career. He couldn't really control me the way he did before because I was kind of above him because I was a fitter and he's just a welder. But he's a lead man, so he kind of had some authority, but not much over fitters. But over welders, he's a big pain in the butt. Like, the first time I met the guy, my lead man, he had been on a trip and he'd come back to work, and I'd been working there for probably a month or so. But this young black guy kept coming by and just being a real smart ass. And I finally decided I was tired of it, so I went down to my supervisor and I said, I don't know who that black guy is that keeps messing with me, but if he doesn't stop, I'm gonna whoop his ass. And so Mac, my supervisor, went to Terrell and told Terrell what I said. It turned out to be my lead man. I didn't know him, but he was my lead man. I said I was gonna whoop his ass, but he didn't leave me alone. And Mac went and told me, he said, you better leave him alone because that guy's gonna hurt you. So after that, me and Terrell were friends. Well, most of the time, but his smart mouth would kind of cause issues sometimes. Like one day, every day he'd hand us our time cards because he acted like we couldn't go get them ourselves because we were too stupid. Anyway, he'd hand us our time cards. He called my name and he kept doing this monkey in the middle bullshit with my time card. I said, give me my fucking card. And I finally snatched it out of his hand and I went and punched out and I went and sat on his car and waited for him in the parking lot. Everybody knew when you went to someone else's car and waited, you were gonna whoop their ass in the parking lot. And that was my plan. So anyway, I saw Terrell coming. I was sitting on his car and Terrell was coming. He was joking and playing with these two guys and he saw me and his head dropped. He's like, no, Hannah, looked like, shit, I'm getting my ass whooped today. Anyway, I saw on his face, and he come on, he's like, hey. He's like trying to be my friend. He said, we're friends. We're friends outside work. I said, no. I said, you're my friend all the time or you're not my friend. I said, and if you're not my friend, I'm going to beat your ass. So he said, okay, I understand. So we were friends from then on. That's the way he handles shit at the tunnel. Like I've said, I was not a nice person, so I love to fight. I love to whoop people's ass, and I did it when I couldn't. When I couldn't, I just dream about it, but I was not nice. Anyway, Terrell never messed with me again. Not like you did that day, because I scared him. I was a big man. I wasn't nice to be around, and everybody knew it. I actually whooped a few Mexicans' asses on the ring. I'd hurt a couple of them, and I made it known that I didn't put up with bullshit, and nobody messed with me. But anyway, I was smart enough that they let me start running cranes, and I got my license and ran cranes for a couple of years. Anyway, being smart never has its advantages. I moved from job to job because I could learn really fast, and I was good at everything I did. So I was constantly being able to move to better positions. Not sure where this is going, but it's going. Anyway, I got moved from Mike's group to a guy named James Two-Thirds, an older black guy. And he was known for hating white people. And James took it as I was in his group for him to run me off, be hateful as he could to me until I quit. So he is like dirty as he could be. And I finally quit. I was working under him, and I finally quit. Because I went one day, I talked to a former person I worked for on a union job, and they were about to start an outage at the paper mill. And I called him and said, you're about to start the outage. I'd like to come work for you for a little bit, because I'm about to move down to Hattiesburg. And I'd like to work for y'all, because the money was a lot better and the working conditions were a lot better. Anyway, Barney told me be there Thursday for orientation and be ready to start work Monday morning. So I left early Thursday, or Wednesday actually. It was a Wednesday. I didn't tell anybody what I was doing. I just needed to leave early, and I went to orientation. And Monday morning, I didn't show up. I started my new job. But before I left Friday evening, after work, I went into HR and told a guy named Clay Masters, and I told Clay I'm leaving. I said, James, y'all don't need to ever put a white person under James, because he hates white people and he doesn't mind proving it. I said, give James what he wants, an all black crew. Don't put another white person through what I've been through. And I left there, and hopefully I got James fired, because I did not like him. He was not a nice person, not to white people, but he bent over backwards to make shit better for black people, but at the expense of white people. I mean, none of it should be based on color, but I was his best welder. I was a fitter, and James, one day during a break, I welded a little piece on the rig that was really hard to get to, and my tiger that worked for me could not get to that piece, could not weld it. So I said, I'm gonna fix it while you're on break. So I welded that little piece up, and after break, that guy, he come back and he saw my weld, and he just sat there just looking at it and taking pictures, and he couldn't believe a weld could look that good. I was a good welder. Anyway, James walked by and asked who welded that, and my fucking tiger said Mason did. Good God, James put me back to welding. He wouldn't let me fit no more because I was so good at welding. I didn't want to weld. I wanted to be a fitter because fitting is more my speed. You're doing different things every day. You're thinking and learning, and this lot better fit for me. Anyway, James made me weld, so I did what I had to do to make money. I was a single parent. You know, during that time, I'd had 2 little girls, and their mother left the day I left the hospital with my daughter. I left my daughter, and their mother left with another man, and I never wanted her again. I raised my daughters by myself. Anyway, long story, but she was not a good woman. Definitely not a good mother. She didn't deserve my daughters. They didn't deserve her. She was sorry, still sorry to this day. I mean, just recently, my middle daughter called me and said, I'm having problems, and the biggest problem is Melvina, her mother. Melvina's just hateful to her own daughters that she never raised. She don't like her own kids. She treats everybody else's kids better than she ever treated her own. Anyway, they never had a mother just like me. And Ivy never had a mother from day one. Well, she had me. I was her mother and her father. For years and years, Ivy was my shadow. Y'all knew that was coming. Anyway, I left the tunnel, went back to the paper mill. But I'm gonna end this video because it's getting kind of long. But I will make another one and get to the NDE eventually. And what happened during and after the NDE was gonna be just wonderful. Anyway, y'all love everybody. Y'all love everybody because God wants you to. I love y'all. Bye.